Hello, my friends. I'm Laura, if you haven't met me before, and this is the first in a series of Penpot Hands-on live sessions, which means that, yep, I'm live. If you are watching me right now, we are
I
live.
found this on the web.
Oh, and thank you, Siri. I think I'll get rid of that. And yeah, so Siri was introducing me to what was going on live as well. So because we are both live, you can ask questions in the comments. So whichever platform that you're on, if you want to ask us any questions as we go, I will do my best to answer them. They can be prototyping related or Penpot related, and we can see how many we can fit in today. So today we're going to talk about prototyping in Penpot. If you are not yet aware of what Penpot is, you have come to the right place. Penpot is a really cool design tool, and it is both free and open. So you can go try it out right now and sign up for it at penpot.app if you want to follow along. Prototyping. What is prototyping? Well, prototyping is something that's really useful for UX and UI designers and really anyone that is trying to build something for technology. And so whether you're an app designer or a web designer, you don't just want to make a static image of what you're building. You want to show how that thing should behave. And it's a great tool for showing clients and stakeholders. Also, if you want to share with a developer how things should work, or just the rest of your team. And so that is where prototyping comes in useful. Now, this video will be available later, so don't worry if you have to drop out. You can always catch up later. You're not going to miss anything. Right, so I think I'm going to jump straight in and going to show you how to prepare your designs for prototyping. So for that, I need to share my screen, just like magic. And I'm going to show you, so this is a little design that I've put together. Now, there's just a few things that I want to make sure that you're aware of before we start off with our prototyping. One, here in the sidebar, we have this section for pages. And basically, I have two different pages here. One of the things I've done is I've put all of the components that are related. So maybe you've got a design system that's for your file or something like that. I've put that on a separate page. And that is so that I can just focus on the things inside of my prototype in this, and it will come in a bit useful later. The other thing that I think you should be aware of when you're prototyping is the importance of labeling your layers. So here is all our layers here. You can see that we've got a layers tab in the left sidebar. And so at the bottom here are all the layers. Now, I know it's quite tedious labeling all your layers, things that are unique and useful. It's not just for your future self. It is not just for the people you're working with inside of this file, but actually giving your layers and all of your elements good names is going to come in incredibly useful when you're prototyping. And so I would bear that in mind. I think that that's a key thing to do. And another concept you need to be familiar of is the concept of boards. And so if you want to create a board, you can use this tool here. It's the second one in the toolbar. And this is how you create a board. Now, boards are very key to prototyping because it's what your prototype will be made up of, is these different boards. Now, you could treat a board like a step in a process or a different view. And here, if you look at my design, here's one I made earlier. I have a view that is my loading screen. I've got a little coffee spotter app. I have a home board. I have a separate board for my menu. So I'll tell you a bit more about that later. I have a board for my faves. So this is the favorite section. I have a view for booking. And I have a map overlay. So a little bit more about that later. So if we think about the kinds of things that we want to prototype, one of the things that you're most likely to want to do is just show how does a person get around this app, this product, this website, this thing that I'm building. And that will require navigation. So the first thing that we're going to look at is how to prototype navigation. Oh, I love that. It's like magic. Right, so first up, I want to show you how we're going to navigate between these different views in our prototype. So if I select my board, and I'm going to choose the prototype tab from the right sidebar. Now, one of the things, if I zoom out, you'll see is I've got a lot of connectors going on already on this board. I've started a little bit of this prototype already so that I can show you how it can all work and you don't have to watch me set up absolutely everything. But this is the main sort of way that you interact with prototyping and the way that you can see how your prototype is going to work. And when I've selected this loading panel, you can see I've got this little connector just hanging out here. It's not actually connected to anything. And this is because my loading screen, which is going to be my first screen in the prototype, if I'm walking through how you might use the app from when you first load it up on your device or the website when it first loads. This could be an app or a website, I think. So I want this to go then to the home page. So what I'm going to do is I can drag this little connector to my home page, to my home board. And what appears when I do that is it says, oh, it's an interaction. And by default, it will make it an on-click interaction. And this is actually going to navigate to the header. So dragging is really cool if you've got quite simple boards. But if you've got quite a lot of layers inside of your board, so for example, inside my home board, if I look at the layer here, I've got this whole popular section. I've got the header, I've got the title, I've got the gallery of all the different locations. So there's a lot of stuff here for that interactive connector to grab onto. So we want to make sure that we direct deliberately to the entirety of the board. We don't just want to go from loading to just viewing the popular right now text. That's not much help. And you could do that. So you can prototype that way if you want. So if I go back to the loading board and on click, I'm actually going to make this, because it's a loader, you don't click a loader. I'm going to make the trigger for this after delay. So what after delay does is when I first enter and I get that first screen, it's just going to have a few seconds, sort of the amount of time when you're loading something, before it then transitions into the home screen. And so on that, I'm going to, after the delay length is going to be, I've got to look up, I'm really bad at translating between seconds and milliseconds, so I had to write down these values ahead of time. Okay, 3000 milliseconds, and that would be 3 seconds to you and me. And so after 3 seconds, we don't want to navigate to the header of the home. We actually want to navigate to the home board. So you remember what I said earlier about naming all of your layers and naming your boards? That's why. And in this list, you can see that it actually will list all of the boards first. So these are all our boards. And then it will list pretty much every single element that you have inside of your design. And so it's going to be hard to navigate to those particularly, and that's why unique names are really important. So I'm going to choose navigate to home. I'm just going to leave the animation for later, and we will talk about that in a minute. Right, so now we have got our loading, we'll on delay navigate to our home. So now I'm going to show you how about we want to navigate from one of these little locations to our booking screen. So you imagine you're like, oh, I'm looking through, I've seen this very cool popular Moose Coffee Cafe and I want to book a table there. And so I'm going to select this. Now you can double click until you get to the layer that you want, or you can just go scroll through your layers. And here I'm going to grab this first location. And again, I could drag the connector to where I want to go. I will. But then I will again tweak that. So this time I'm going to do on click. I don't just want a delay to transition into the booking behavior, because there's a lot of different things you can click in this area. And so I'm going to click on Moose Coffee and it's going to take me to the book a table. So on click, that's my trigger there. I'm going to navigate to, and the destination is going to be the book board. Again, I will show you some cool animation stuff a little bit later. And now I think we've done enough, but I think it's time to view our prototype and see how that worked, or hope it did work. So what we're going to do is we're going to press this little view mode icon. It's a little play button in the top right-hand corner of the interface. And that is going to open a new tab. Now, what in this new tab, it's going to show me all of my boards. And so actually it's currently showing a little success modal that I've got. So I don't really want to see that. I'm going to, here in the top left-hand corner, you can see that I can choose between which page I want to view first. So I could view my components again, or I can view the prototype. And then I have the option between all the different boards and the elements that are on this screen. And so I want to go to the loading one. So, oh, no good at browsing. Scrolly, scrolly, scroll. There we go. Oh, I went back, that's why, right. Now I can scroll. Okay, so I want to scroll to my, forgive the terrible animation there. It's all the way at the end, isn't it? It's always going to be at the end. Yeah, there we go, loading screen. So now I'm viewing my loading screen. You see that transition? It went pretty quickly because the menu was hanging over it, but that transitioned me through to the home page. And now I'm on this home page. I can click on Moose Coffee. See my little mouse cursor's turned into the little pointy one. And that has gone to book a table. So yay, my prototype is working. Now I want to return back to the edit mode. And to do that, I can either close the tab that I'm in because it's opened a new tab. I can just switch to another tab. Or I can also, in the top right-hand corner, there's this little pencil edit icon, and that will take me back to editing my board. It's just refreshed it for me. So that is the view mode. Does anyone have any questions so far? Now I'm going to turn my head to this side because I have another screen over here where I can see where your questions are. And let us have a look. And this is just a reminder to everyone that if you do have any questions throughout this demo, feel free to just ask them in the comment section, and we have the ability to show them on the screen here, just like magic, and I will do my best to answer them. I can't make any promises. I don't know everything, but I'm a pretty big Penpot nerd at this point, so I should be able to at least work out some workaround or help you find out where to find the answer. Great, and so I think we're ready to have a look at maybe prototyping some overlays. Little bit of water as well. So earlier that I showed you, I've got this map overlay going on here. And what I want that to do is I have this button here that's for coffee near me. And I want to, on clicking that button, I want us to go to open up that overlay on top of the screen. So overlays is a really common thing that you would use in UI design. And it's really nice that we can actually prototype those here. So in order to do this, I want to select the button itself because I don't want clicking anywhere around it to trigger the overlay, just this button. So I've double clicked it till I've got to it, but I could also go through my layers in the left sidebar and be, okay, this is the button here, the coffee near me button. And I'm going to go back to prototype and I'm going to set a new interaction. So on click, the action I'm going to choose is open overlay. And the destination is the overlay that you want to open. So my destination is the map overlay. I want the map overlay to open on top of the board. Now, where do I want that overlay to be positioned relative to? Well, because I'm looking at the home board, I want it to be positioned to the home board. And centrally, I think, is the center that I wanted it? No, top center. So I can either choose from this list or I can choose using this sort of more visual diagram way of doing it. So this is just saying that I want the overlay to be positioned to the top of the board and in the center of the board. The last thing you want is an overlay that sort of appears a bit wonky, like off to one side. And to mimic true overlay style behavior, I'm going to select the option to close when clicking outside, because that's how overlays usually work. And I'm also going to add a background overlay. And what that does is kind of puts a little overlay in between the overlay layer and the board layer to give that effect. I don't know why I'm explaining this. I'm going to show you in a minute anyway. And so now I've done that, you can see that my connector is pointing all the way over to this map overlay. Now we do have the option that when you click outside of the overlay, it's going to close. But what I also want is I want to be able to give them a visible way of exiting that overlay, give people multiple ways out. So for that, I'm going to choose this button that I've made here, this little close button, and I'm going to add an interaction to that. And the interaction I'm going to add, so the trigger is on click. When someone clicks on this button, I want to close the overlay. Now, this destination is actually telling me which overlay do I want to close. You could think you could probably create some quite complex interactions with overlays and being able to close one overlay with another overlay, but that's not what we want right now. So I want to close the map overlay. And so you see the connectors pointing back around into the map overlay. Now I think we're ready to try this prototype out. So I'm going to return back to this view mode. And I'm going to go to the home page. Here we go. So I regret making so many boards with so many elements. Right. So I've got my coffee near me button and I press it. Ta-da! I have a map overlay and you can see it's top and central. And it's got a little close button here. You see my cursor has changed when I hover over it, and I click that and it's closed. Click it and it's open, and I click it and it's closed. That's actually a little trick that I'd love to show you. If I return back to edit mode. So I don't know if you noticed, but when the overlay came up, there was space around the overlay. I kind of wanted that effect so that people could see that it was a layer that was on top of the page. And the way that I did that was I actually made a board. The board is actually a bit bigger than the overlay, and the overlay itself has some padding or margin. It could be margin, it could be padding around it. And so that is how I create that overlay effect. So I've done that, I've done the closing. I'm just checking through my notes. I want to make sure I don't forget to tell you something. Okay, I think we're good. Does anyone have any questions related to prototyping overlays or anything that I've spoken about already? How do you set the overlay background opacity? That is not something you can currently do if you wanted to set. So with my overlay interaction here, so we have this option for add a background overlay. That's a nice little quick checkbox, added extra. What you could do instead, I'm going to try it out live here, so it better work. I'm going to deselect that, and I'm going to go to my board. And you know that I said that I have this deliberate space around it. So if you made this board really big, so it could cover any layer, any board that it's layered over the top of, and I'm going to give it a fill. No, that's grey at the moment. So we want to go wild, just so we can see the example. I'm going to make it bright pink. But we'll make it transparent because that's how we do overlays here. And now if I go into the prototyping mode, if this works as it should, there we go, pink overlay. So you can't change the color with that specific setting, but you can very easily make your own overlay and customize it however you want. So you could add, you see a little drop shadow around my board here, and you can add all sorts of detail that you like and that suits your preference or your users as well. Do we have any other questions that are related to the overlay situation? Situation makes it sound very serious. Okay, great. Well, Riza, if you do have any more questions, just let us know in the comments and they will wing their way over to me. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that I will share this exact file later on. If you want to play with it and unpick it, I'll probably share it in the Penpot community. So if you're not on there yet, you should go on there because it's the easiest place for me to upload the Penpot file. And it's a great place to just chat about Penpot. People ask really good questions there. So I would well recommend you try that out. So earlier I said that we would get to showing you how to make these animations on these prototypes. So I think the next section will be animating prototypes. Now, another overlay that I wanted to introduce you to is the menu overlay. So you see, I showed you earlier this kind of little weird half-width little menu that I got going on. It's got a close button on it. It's got a popular link, which actually links you back to the home page, and a favorites, which will take you to the favorites. If I open the prototype, you can see that. The logo in the bottom, fairly conventional. Now, I'm going to set how we open and close that menu. And what we do for this is we're going to select this little menu button here, classic hamburger style menu. And I'm going to add an interaction for that. And with this is going to go on click. So when we click this menu button, we are going to open another overlay. And the destination, the overlay that we're going to open is the menu. And we are going to open it relative to home again, because we want it to fit so that it slides in at the top of the board itself. And I'm going to position it, I'm trying to do the spatial, work this one out. It's going to be top right. Yeah, I think that'll work. The menu button is on the top right, so I feel like the menu should slide out on the top right. Is that logical? We'll see. And much like other overlays, I'll close when clicking outside of it. I'll add a background overlay because it just stops things from being distracting. And here is where I can make this really cool. So I can add dissolve animation if I wanted, but I'm actually going to add a slide animation. A slide is perfect for these kinds of menus where they take up some of the screen, but not all of the screen. And I'm going to make it slide from the right because it's going to be on the right. So I want to slide in from the right. My duration, 300 milliseconds, that's fine. It's kind of quick enough that you notice it, but well, not slow enough that you notice it, but not so slow that you're like, oh, when is this menu going to open? And then we can go and view this. Oh, don't forget the close button, Laura. We want to close that menu as well. You could close by clicking outside of the overlay, but it's always good to have a visible way out. And so trigger on click, we are going to close the overlay, the destination. So as we talked about this before, with the overlay, when you close it, the destination is that overlay. That's the thing that you want to close. And so I'm going to close the menu. And I'm going to add an animation for that as well. So when I open the overlay, the menu, it's going to slide one direction. So when I close it, I want it to slide back, don't I? So I'm going to make that slide in the other direction, and 300 is great default. Right, now we can play with it. Going to find my board. This jumping to random boards is quite frustrating, but this is not the default behavior of Penpot. This is actually because I have taken flows out. And I'm going to introduce you to the concept of flows in a minute. And this will stop the, oh, I have to open it up and then find the random board. That is a me thing, not a Penpot thing. Just so you know. So we're going to go back to the home board. Great. So now I'm going to click on this menu button. Fingers crossed it opens in the right direction. Yes. And so there we go. There's our menu sliding in. If I scroll down, you can see it's got a little logo at the bottom. And there's my menu sliding out again. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Sliding in and sliding out. Fabulous. I also mentioned before that we have the option for a dissolve animation. So I'm going to show you that next, because I thought a really good use of a dissolve animation. Now, dissolve is kind of a nice transition to have on like a lot of different navigation. You might want to just add a subtle dissolve animation to make it feel like it's smoothing into something rather than just flickering from one to the other. And so that is what I'm going to do on this loading animation. So I've selected my loading board. I'm going to the prototype tab. If I press this little triple dot options icon, it's going to bring up the options for this interaction. And I'm going to add an animation. And this time I'm going to use dissolve. Now I'm going to scroll and find what I wrote down as a good animation length for this, because as you know, I am terrible at working out milliseconds. Okay, I want 600 milliseconds for this, which is equal to 0.6 milliseconds. You'd think that the maths isn't that difficult there, but it's the number of decimal places that confuses me. I'm just going to go with linear easing right now, but you do have a lot more interesting easing options for how it eases in and out. I'd say that the effect of those is a lot more visible the longer your animation is going on. If you have quite a quick animation, it's maybe less visible. Maybe you pay more attention than I do. So I'm going to now go into view mode. And I'm going to jump to my loading board, which if I remember correctly was at the end here. And now should dissolve. Yeah, so it's pretty quick. I could have probably done it for a bit longer, but I think it works. So it's nice to have a nice little dissolve animation to get into it. So I think with that, does anyone have any questions related to animations, overlays, prototypes in general? Is there a way to set the first board when playing the prototype? Oh, yeah, I will come to that next, I promise you. That is the next thing on my list to show you, and it is really annoying that that has not been coming up. And so that is a problem with my demo, and I'll do it better next time, I think. So are there any other questions that we have? Because I will show you that in one moment. And a reminder that if you do have any questions, you can ask us in the comments and we can bring them up as if by magic. And also, if you're watching this back later and you have any questions, please feel free to answer them, to ask them. You can answer them if you want, but to ask them on the video itself, or find us in our community space. That's a great place for asking questions. And you'll get responses from all of the Penpot team when you ask your questions there. So it's a great place to go. So I'm going to show you about flows, which is how you choose which board gets shown first. Now, when you first start creating interactions from the prototype tab in Penpot, what it will actually do is it will automate an initial flow. Depending on the first one you've clicked, it will actually create a flow from that. But I've taken that away because I did all of this prototyping beforehand that has all of these wild connectors going on. So I will going to add consciously a flow now. So this is my flow one. What you might use a flow for is basically any starting point you want to have throughout your app, your product, your website, whatever you're building. This might be a way that you show how different users might flow through your app depending on their role, depending on what they want to do. It might be something that reflects different tasks. It could just be different starting points. So I'm just going to call this flow Coffee Spotter because it's right from the beginning. Can't type. Now I've got the flow in there. You can see that it actually puts a little button on the canvas itself, and it's here as well. And so I can then press on Coffee Spotter, and it takes me straight to the loading screen, which will then transition to the home screen. I also have the option to choose it from this list, which would be better when I add another flow. So I'm going to go back to that. Maybe I'm going to create another flow for the booking, so you can jump straight to what it looks like when you're on the booking page. And I'm going to add a flow there using the little plus icon, and I'm going to call that book a table. I like to use a unique name, and that way when I press book a table, that will take me straight into the book a table screen. And so that is how you do it without having to continually shift between all of these different boards. And so what you do is you set the starting point for a flow. Obviously, you don't set subsequent steps in your flow because your user can discover those for themselves. So for example, oh, from here I can open a menu. Oh, from here I might decide to choose a date. Oh, from here I might reserve a table and get my little reservation confirmation. And just check if there's anything that I was going to tell you from that. No, but otherwise that you can just jump between them from this view option here as well. Did that answer your question? And does anyone else have any questions related to flows or to overlays or to animations or to prototypes in general? Is there a way to display the prototype in the context of a device viewport? Not exactly, but there are ways that you could do that kind of thing. So for example, you might want to create a board that contains like the outside of a device. And then you could put your loading board, your home boards, all those boards inside of that. That's a pretty good trick for doing it. I will show you an example of how this could work. So I'm making a little board here. I'm going to fill it with a rectangle. And I'm going to put another rectangle on top of that. Wonky rectangles, but it doesn't matter for the example. I've used Booleans to subtract one rectangle from the other. So I've kind of made a little frame. So imagine this little frame is your little device. And now inside of that frame, I'm actually going to make this board bigger, but I'm going to keep the frame there. And on my board, I'm going to make a series of circles. I'm going to make them different colors for those of you who can distinguish the color. Oh, that'll be a bit of a subtle difference, Laura. And let's make that one blue. Going to make this one brighter green. Right. Gorgeous design, Laura. Excellent work. Right. I moved that layer with my little frame to the top. Now in my constraints here, this is in the design section of the sidebar, I can choose fix when scrolling. And now if I go to, I'll make a little, we just learned our lesson. We want to create a flow here. So like a device, I'm going to call my flow, and now it will open in the view mode. So now when I scroll, I can zoom that out a touch. Not that much. Now when I scroll, it's as if it's on a device. And so that would be the workaround that I would recommend you do. You could probably get away with quite a lot in that situation if you want to show it as if it were a device. There's probably some other really great ways of doing this that the team knows about, and I'm sure they will pipe in, or you can ask the question again on the community and get their feedback there. Do we have any other questions related to all of this section before I jump into the next section, the final section? Do not look at my ugly design. Oh no, I was gonna get rid of it so it wasn't messing up my board, but I said I'd share this later, so I won't. Okay, great. So next, the final thing that you probably want to do is share your prototypes with the people that you're working with or with your clients. So we're going to talk about sharing prototypes. So you got your cool prototype all set up, and we go into view mode so that we're ready to share it. Now, why would someone want to, if they wanted to view your prototype, they can easily do so, but they can also do some quite other cool things in this view mode. They can leave comments for you. So you could put a little comment in here and say, make the logo bigger, that classic feedback. And there you can have comments in your prototype. If you're working with developers, or if you yourself are a developer, you can also go into this little inspect mode. And this is really cool because you can then get a view of all of the different layers. For example, my logo, and there I can see, oh, this is the size of the logo. This is its distance from my either edge of the board. You can get some of the key bits of information about it, and also CSS properties, really handy. Or you can just go full in and get the code for it. So here we've got our CSS, we've got HTML, and if you're working with SVG, if you wanted to get the SVG for this logo, you can grab that too. So that's really handy. If you want to share it, we have this button here for sharing. And what this does, it will generate a link. I'm going to destroy that link quickly. There we go. This is what it will look like if you press it for the first time. And there you can get a link where anyone with the link will have access to your prototype. And from there, you can also have a little bit more control over, okay, do I want to just share the prototype? Probably don't want to share the main components. Unless it's someone on your team, you might want to do it. Who's allowed to comment? Who's allowed to inspect the code? And then you can get your link. And then with this link, you can copy it and share it with other people. And you can go on later and destroy it. So if I got given one of those links, I could open it in a new tab. And it would take me to that beautiful board that I just created. Or I can jump into the other flows like this. So that gives you the means for sharing these. What you can also do is if you wanted to link to a specific flow in your prototype, once you've viewed, so you've gone and you copy that share link, paste it in, enter it, and be like, oh no, I don't want to show this ugly board. I want to show the book a table flow. If you navigate to that from view mode, then copy the URL, then if you open that up, you will take you straight to that specific flow. And so if you wanted to share a specific flow with a client or to someone you're working with, and you wanted to be on the same page, that is how you link directly to that. Do we have any questions about sharing prototypes, about prototypes in general, about overlays, about animations, about any of the things that I've discussed? Flows, that's the other thing. Please just ask questions in the comments section. It's not just for comments, it's for questions as well. You can ask me about other things Penpot related as well if you would like. And I think we are into the Q&A. Just like magic. So what questions do you have? Can I make scrollable areas in my prototypes? Well, I've just showed you a way around making scrollable areas with that example that I showed you before. So if you're in your board and you choose to have a fixed area, that really fundamentally makes the rest of the board scrollable. So it's kind of like flipping the concept on its head. You don't necessarily have scrollable areas, but you do have fixed areas. And so you can work around it in that way. But also if that is a feature that is really important to you and something that you really need for your prototypes, I would recommend just telling the Penpot team, let them know why you need it, what you would use it for. It's really helpful when someone's designing something to have an understanding for what your use case actually is and why you might want to use a feature like that compared to a different feature. So if you let the team know, they are incredibly open to feedback and suggestions. Like pretty much the whole of Penpot is built around the amazing feedback and suggestions from people. So I just recommend you ask. Do we have any other questions? When I send a multi-page prototype, each page opens a new tab in the browser. Can I avoid this? Not to my knowledge, no. Multi-page prototype, because the one that I was doing, I'm just going to try and reproduce this. So kill this link, destroy the link. So if I share it with both of my pages and I go to get a link, I do already have a lot of tabs open, so I'll get rid of all of those. And it's every time I've opened it up again. And then I go to view this link. No, this is just opening one page. Do you mean that every time you go to prototype it? I'm not sure I understand the question then. Maybe if you could give an example in the community space and I can get a better understanding of what you're asking. That is almost certainly a me thing and not a you thing. Are there any commenting features for shared prototypes? Yeah, absolutely. So this little button here in the middle is for comments, and you can use these comments on your prototype. So before I said, can I make the logo bigger? This time I'm going to say, can you make the menu button bigger? That's actually more of a legitimate critique because hit areas are really important. So you can leave comments like that. There's different ways you can view the comments too. You don't just have to be in the prototyping mode, having shared it. If you're in the edit mode as well, you can view the comments from this side. So you can actually see from edit mode, oh, look, this is where Laura said, could you make the menu button bigger? And this is where Laura said, make the logo bigger. So I can see the comments in place when I'm editing the file too. And that commenting features, if you missed it before, when you go to share a prototype from the share button here, you can choose whether only the team members can comment or all Penpot users. And so all Penpot users is anyone who has access to the link because they need to have Penpot in order to view the prototype. And yeah, so you can let everyone comment if they wanted. Do we have any more questions? How do I choose a specific flow when I share the prototype link? Great. So here, if I'm in my book flow, get rid of my comment. Done with that comment. There we go. So I'm going to create a share link. Copy that link. I'm going to open up the contents of that link. Right. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to share the like a device flow. I want to share the coffee spotter flow. So I'm going to switch to that. Bear in mind, I've followed the share link. I've switched to the coffee spotter flow. And now I'm going to copy the URL that's in the address bar here. And now when I paste that, or when I share it with the person I want to share that specific flow with, it jumps straight to that coffee spotter flow. Do we have any more questions? A complex product for my client, too big for just one single page, performance issues. So I split the content into topics and every topic on single pages. So this is talking about how a prototype that you've had is opening in many different tabs because you have a page for each of those different prototypes. No, I can see that as being something that you might want though. So I definitely recommend talking to the Penpot team about that because I could see how it is really useful to split your content across multiple pages, even multiple files. If you have a big system, you've also got a design system included in that, you might want to split it across. And it would be interesting to think about ways that you could package that up nicely to share it with people. Do we have any more questions? Remember, you can ask a question just in the comments section. Almost every platform I think that you're viewing this on, you can ask questions, or you can always ask a question later on the video. You can join us in our community space. Anyway, you want to ask questions, you go for it. How do I hide the hotspot areas during user testing? That is great because I wrote that down that I was supposed to talk about it and then I completely forgot. So when I switch between these pages, you can see it flashes up this kind of beautiful Penpot turquoisey, aqua, cyan kind of color. This is because it's showing me where the interactions are. We have a few options for this. We have an option to don't show interactions. Now what this will do is essentially make your prototype mimic how a real life product will work. You can't see where the interactive areas are, but your mouse cursor will change when you move over them. And so I can see, oh, that's clickable. You have the option to show interactions. And what that does is highlights everything on the page or on the board that is interactive right now. And so this is showing, oh, look, this coffee near me button's interactive, the menu button's interactive, these locations are all interactive. And you can have show interactions on click. So what this does is a kind of a halfway in between. It's not going to show you the interaction, but when you click it, it just flashes up the possible interactions. So it's kind of just reinforcing, letting you know what's there without creating that visual noise all of the time. Do we have any more questions? What is the process for engineering handoff once the prototype has been approved, i.e. exporting assets to Zeppelin or Framer? To some degree, it depends on how you want to use your assets. I would say that for many things, you probably actually just want to be working, if you want to work directly with HTML and CSS or SVG, You'd want to do that from Penpot itself because it's got you with some great starting points. I'll show you this on this prototype itself. So for example, a grid like this is kind of a tricky thing to do in a way that works on the web in any other design tool. This is one of the reasons I think Penpot is really cool, is that you can do layout exactly the same way that you do it with CSS. And so why would you want to re-engineer all of that, look at how this works and work it out and rewrite all the code all yourself when you could just grab it from Penpot? So if I hit edit grid here, you can actually see, look, this is what the grid structure is. If I go to the inspect tab, this gives me all of the relevant CSS properties. So here I can see, okay, this is display grid, grid template rows, grid template columns, how well the alignment and justification of your items and the gap between them. So if you want to write the code yourself and pop it in, you can do that. If you want to grab the code, you can also grab that. It's going to be a lot of font face code there, but you can also see it's decent code as well. It's not junk, it's really usable. And so you can grab that from there too. If you did want to export these to a different program, something like Framer, if you wanted to actually use these kind of graphic assets, the SVGs, you can do that by exporting the specific items. You'd probably want to export it as an SVG. I don't think anyone this day and age, back in a bygone era, we would have absolutely exported all of these as JPEGs and pieced them together in the browser. That is unnecessary nowadays. But if there are specific graphics and things like that that you want to export, maybe a logo, icons, you can do that using SVG too. I'm not sure about, to be honest, I've not used Zeppelin or Framer myself, so I'm kind of guessing at how you might want to interact with those, but if you have any more specifics, I'm also a developer, so I can attempt to answer your question. Do we have any more questions? Is it possible to create carousels using the prototyping functionality? Yes, I think so. I think it will be tricky for me to do the whole thing right now, but so here is what my brain is telling me. Okay, I have a board that's for my first carousel item, and then I have a board for each other carousel item, and I have my primary board, which the carousel appears on. And then on my primary board, I would probably place that board inside. Get different colors, you can see. This would be my primary form of interaction. I would add an on-click, and then I would make this other board. This is why you need to label your board so you don't end up with a list that just says board, board, board. So yeah, so then I would have the interaction. I can drag it, doesn't matter really. And I would make that an overlay. And so what I would do is I would overlay, and I could use that with sliding animations. Yeah, so you could slide. And so from each overlay, it has an interaction. On click will slide to the next overlay, or you could have little separate buttons for controlling it. That's good usability, good accessibility as well. So yeah, you definitely could create a carousel. That's a challenge I'm going to try later. So I can show you the whole thing right now, but it is doable. I'm sure of it. Any other questions? Can I have a prototype with auto delay changes from board 1 to board 2 that is placed into another prototype board 3 to see that changes as an animation inside? I think so. Yeah, I think you should be able to do that. If you, I will delete the useless boards. I said I'd share this later, but there is some stuff that you don't need to have. Yes, I think you would be able to, because you can apply delay interactivity to individual items. They don't have to be to whole boards. And you could trigger it, rather than triggering it on click, you could trigger it having it on mouse enter, or you could have it, you could trigger it on click or mouse enter. Oh, after delay. I think it should work. It would be interactions inside interactions. That's another one I'll play with later, I think. Yeah. In theory, I believe so. Do we have any other questions? We're coming up to wrapping up time, but if we have any more, we can try and squeeze them in. Regarding interactions, is it possible to send the prototype without interactions enabled? So if you wanted to share a version of your prototype that's just static, I would say that probably the easiest way of doing that is to make a copy of your file, delete the interactions, delete all the prototyping elements from it, which is pretty easy to do because once you select the prototype tab or you select anything with a prototype on it, you can see where the interactions are. So it's quite easy to spot them, to wipe them out. That's probably the way that I would do it. Because yeah, otherwise, if someone looks at it in view mode, they would get all of those interactions. You could hide them so that they're not visible, but they'd still be able to interact with them. And any more? Any more questions? Can you use interactions to model state changes for a component, like clicking a checkbox will uncheck it? Yes, I have done this before. It's really fiddly. So I maybe wouldn't recommend it. It's the same with, say, hover navigations. You using mouse enter and mouse leave, you can very easily create hover interactions, but it's a lot of work to do that for everything that you want to be hoverable on a page. And the same goes for the checkbox. I did try this in, I think it was the first prototype example I made. I was like, oh, that would be quite a cool thing to be able to model. And what I did was I did it using overlays. So a checkbox would be an overlay. So you click the outside of the checkbox itself, and that would open an overlay that was the check mark. And then if you clicked it, you could toggle off it. That would deselect it. So you could definitely do it that way. I hope my verbal explanation made some kind of sense. Do we have any more questions? I'm looking over to my other screen when I do that. I'm not just being pensive. Can I sync prototype interactions from a main component to component copies? Not right now. So it could seem to be quite a cool feature. It's a feature that's on my wish list of being able to say, if I made this menu button, I'd want to always make that open the menu, no matter which page I decided to put that component on. And right now that doesn't work. You need to do it for each one. But I could absolutely see that being added as a feature in the future. I can imagine that's a pretty common request. Now we've got just a few minutes left. If anyone has any more questions that they want to ask us in the comments. I think I've already answered the one about not showing interactions so the client doesn't see them. You can just do that by create a copy of your file, remove the prototype interactions. I'd say that was the easiest way of doing it, having a bit more control. I don't know about you, but when I used to send stuff to clients, I'd often create like a special client version that's like cleaner or nicer and a bit neater and tidier, not my messy working file. So you might be something like that. Well, great. I will share the file, this example file, as is, ugly example and everything included, in the Penpot community space later on. So if you want to get hold of it, you can grab it there, or I'm sure we'll put a link to it in the description of this video if you want to be able to get hold of it there. If you want to see another example that I've made of prototyping, if you go to Penpot's libraries and templates collection, if you just stick Penpot libraries templates into your search engine of choice, you'll be able to bring that up. And I created a set of prototyping examples in there too. I've also written a tutorial on the Penpot blog and also made a video that's around the same theme, all focused on that template. So there's plenty of examples in there to get you started as well. Sign up for Penpot. It's great. It's free and open. You can just get in there and try it out right away. No barriers, unlimited seats, unlimited drafts, unlimited pages, no limits like that. You can also join us for our next hands-on session, which is going to be on the 27th of August. That's a Tuesday again. And we are going to be focusing that time on wireframing. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you follow us on LinkedIn, or wherever you're viewing this right now, you'll be the first to be notified when that is coming up. If you have any suggestions, the things that you'd like us to see us to do hands-on about in the future, any topics you want to cover, any particular use cases you want to see, any examples you want me to build, let us know in the comments, or join us in the community space. Ask us about them then. Find me wherever. Let me know. You can find Penpot everywhere. At Penpot, we're on like all the social platforms, including Mastodon, my social platform of choice. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And now I think I will go and give my throat a rest. This is a lot of talking. So enjoy the rest of your day. It was lovely to see you all here. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate all the questions and all the comments.